All right, so let's dive into this. We're going to talk about an element that, for most people, brings up images of, cartoonish green glows or Cold War nightmares. But the real story of uranium, oh, it is so much stranger. It's a story that connects ancient Roman artisans, a secret mine in the Congo, and believe it or not, the superpowered data centers that are building our future right now.
And yeah, that quote pretty much nails it, doesn't it? It gets right to the heart of the matter. This incredible duality, this immense city-building power on one hand and just immense danger on the other. That tension has defined uranium's entire journey. It's what makes this story so compelling. So, where does a story like this even begin? Probably not where you think. You see, the story of uranium doesn't start in some 20th century lab with scientists in white coats. Nope, it starts thousands of years ago, with people who had absolutely no idea what they were holding in their hands. They just knew it was some kind of spicy dirt that could do some very unusual things.
What's so fascinating is just watching how uranium's identity completely changes over time. First, way back in ancient Rome, it's just a pigment, right? Used to make beautiful yellow glass. Then, centuries later, German miners are literally cursing it as pechblende, or bad luck rock, because it kept showing up where they were hoping to find a valuable silver. It's not until 1789 that it even gets a proper name, uranium. And then here's the twist. The Curies figure out that the waste, the stuff left over from processing it, is actually even more powerful. And that, of course, leads them to discover radium.
And the discovery of radium, well, it leads to one of the most tragic and frankly horrifying chapters in this entire story. Back in the 1920s, companies hired these young women, often teenagers, to paint watch faces with radium so they'd glow in the dark. Now, to get a really fine point on their brushes, their supervisors told them to lick the tips, just use their lips. They were literally ingesting radioactive material, all while being told it was completely harmless. The devastating health effects they suffered, truly horrific stuff. It eventually led to landmark changes in labor laws. And it's this tragic but perfect illustration of a core economic concept: externalities. You see, the company made its profit, but the real cost, the unimaginable health cost, that was paid by the workers, who never agreed to it. It's a crucial lesson that, honestly, echoes through the entire history of resource extraction. Okay, so let's fast forward now into the 20th century. This is where uranium transforms from just a scientific curiosity into the single most important strategic material on the entire planet. Its destiny becomes completely tangled up with global power and, of course, with conflict. Now this is one of my favorite stories in all of economic history. It's just incredible. The uranium for the Manhattan Project, it didn't come from the US. It came from one single secret mine in the Congo called Shinkolobwe. And the ore there was just unbelievably rich. We're talking 65% uranium. For perspective, most mines today are lucky if they get 0.5%. And get this, the director of the mine had the incredible foresight to ship 1,200 tons of it to a warehouse in New York City in 1940, years before the US government even knew they were going to need it. Just amazing. And after the war, the story takes another totally bizarre turn. Through a program called Megatons to Megawatts, the U.S. started buying enriched uranium from dismantled Russian warheads and using it to fuel American power plants. Just think about that for a second. For 2 whole decades, there was a 1 in 10 chance that your desk lamp was being powered by a former Soviet nuke. It was the ultimate swords to plowshares program, but it also completely flooded the market with cheap supply, crashing the price for miners for an entire generation.
And that brings us to today. Because that secondary supply, all that stuff from old warheads, it's gone. Decades of rock-bottom prices meant that almost nobody was investing in new mines. And so, for the first time in a very long time, demand is starting to seriously outpace new production. We're in a squeeze.
Now, to really get why there's a squeeze, you gotta understand the nuclear fuel cycle. It's a really complex industrial process. So first, you have the upstream. That's miners digging up ore and milling it into a powder called yellowcake. Then there's the midstream. That powder is converted into a gas and then enriched. And finally, you have the downstream, where that gas is turned back into these tiny ceramic pellets that go into fuel rods for a reactor. Each and every one of these steps is a potential bottleneck. This image here really highlights one of those major bottlenecks. The process of converting that yellow cake powder on the left into the special gas needed for enrichment on the right, that's only done in a handful of facilities on the entire planet.
For decades, Russia pretty much dominated this part of the market. And now, well, the West is scrambling to rebuild its own capacity from scratch. Another thing that's absolutely critical to understand is that the mining itself is also highly concentrated. Just look at this chart. Kazakhstan, by itself, produces over 40% of the world's uranium. Now, when one single country has that much control over a commodity, any little disruption, whether it's politics or just, say, a shortage of sulfuric acid for their mines, it can send massive shockwaves through the entire market. So all of this is causing the global market to literally split in two. You've got Western utilities in the US and Europe desperately trying to create a secure supply chain sourcing from allies, places like Canada and Australia. And at the same time, you have an Eastern aligned chain forming around Russia and China. This huge geopolitical reshuffling is creating a two-tiered market where security of supply is suddenly becoming just as important, if not more important, than the price.
So, just to recap, we have a fragile, geopolitically fractured supply chain. And now, colliding head-on with that fragile system is a massive, completely unexpected demand shock from the single biggest technology trend on the planet: artificial intelligence.
Just look at that number. 175%. That is the projected growth in electricity demand from AI data centers by just 2030. This is not a small increase, folks. This is like adding an entire new, incredibly energy-hungry country to the global grid. And this electricity, it needs to be on 24/7, no exceptions.
And that is why the big tech giants are all of a sudden talking constantly about nuclear power. AI models, they can't run on electricity that's only available when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. They need unwavering, reliable, 24/7, carbon-free power. And when you look at it, nuclear is the only technology that checks all three of those boxes. It runs over 92% of the time, providing a constant, clean base load of electricity that these data centers have to have. And this is why it's all possible. This tiny little fuel pellet, about the size of a gummy bear, has the same amount of energy packed inside it as a literal ton of coal. It's that unbelievable energy density that makes nuclear such a potent and maybe necessary solution for the enormous energy needs of our future.
Okay, so we have traveled from ancient Roman glass all the way to futuristic AI data centers. Phew. So, what does all this mean for us? What are the big takeaways from this whole strange story?
Let's break it down. For politicians, the lesson is clear. Energy sovereignty is national security. Controlling your own fuel cycle means controlling your nation's future. For investors, this is a huge warning. Supply is incredibly slow to respond to price. It can take 10 years or more to get a new mine running, and that creates these massive, volatile boom and bust cycles. And for all of us, for the public, the story shows how an element we once just associated with fear and war is now becoming absolutely critical for a clean and technologically advanced future.
When you think about it, uranium has always been a kind of mirror, reflecting back at us our greatest hopes and our deepest fears. It powered the race for supremacy in the 20th century. So the question we have to ask now is, as we enter this new age, an age defined by artificial intelligence and the desperate need for clean energy, what new role are we going to ask this strange and powerful element to play?